lived in a quiet second-floor apartment on the outskirts of Portland, nestled above an aging bakery that always smelled faintly of sugar and yeast. Her routine was simple. She woke at 6, made black coffee in a chipped ceramic mug, watered her 3 houseplants, and walked to work at the local library. The same faces greeted her each day: Mrs. Lindholm, with her murder mysteries, the teenage couple whispering behind the shelves, the man who always forgot his library card. Nothing about her life was remarkable, and that's how she liked it. Her phone rarely buzzed. Her evenings were quiet. She ate dinner on the couch while reruns played in the background. When she couldn't sleep, she read classic horror novels, her cat, Poe, curled at her feet. Sometimes she would laugh at how mundane it all felt, like the static between radio stations. Outside her window, the city moved slowly. Autumn was beginning to creep in, brushing the trees with rust and orange. Each morning brought a chill that made her hesitate before leaving her warm apartment. The bakery owner, Mr. Riley, always greeted her with a nod and the smell of freshly baked bread. It was comfort in its most distilled form. Anna kept journals, though not the dramatic kind. Her notes were functional, methodical. What she ate, what she read, thoughts that seemed worth capturing. There was something grounding in handwriting, something that kept her anchored. On weekends, she would visit her parents' grave, brush leaves from the headstones, and sit in silence. Even that, even grief, had become part of the routine. Life didn't surprise her anymore, and that felt like safety. There were no sudden knocks on the door, no late-night calls. Her world was small and manageable. Controlled, she often wondered if she was invisible, not in a tragic sense, but like background furniture in someone else's photograph, a part of the setting, not the subject. She hadn't always been this way. There had been a time when she wanted noise, chaos, something to break the stillness. But that was before everything happened, before the silence felt necessary. Now she took comfort in her quiet rituals. Her world was soft around the edges, familiar like the worn spine of a favorite book. And so the days blended. Predictable, gentle, the kind of life that never makes headlines, never shifts beneath your feet. A quiet life, a safe one, until of course, it wasn't. It began with a sound so faint at first that Anna thought she'd imagined it. A soft metallic tap, like a spoon against glass, coming from somewhere inside her apartment. She paused mid-step one evening, holding her breath, but Poe was asleep, on the windowsill, and nothing moved. She shrugged it off, assuming it was the building settling, or perhaps something from the bakery below. The next night the tapping returned. It was sharper this time, more deliberate. She followed the sound into the kitchen, but nothing was there. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rattle of pipes. She stood in the doorway, her skin prickling. Eventually it stopped, on its own, leaving her in the kind of silence that made every corner feel like it was watching. She mentioned it casually to Mr. Riley in the morning. "Probably the wind," he said. "These old buildings creak at night. Nothing to worry about." Anna nodded, pretending to believe him. But the noise didn't sound like creaking. It sounded intentional. Over the next few days, other things shifted. Subtly, a spoon moved from one side of the sink to the other. Her journal closed itself when she knew she'd left it open. A faint smell of smoke lingered in the hallway, even though no one in the building smoked. She checked the locks on her door twice, then 3 times. She started leaving the hallway light on. At work, she found herself distracted, eyes drifting toward the library windows. She kept catching glimpses of someone passing by too slowly, their shape unfamiliar, as though they didn't belong in this decade. Poe began hissing at corners, fur-raised eyes fixed on nothing. One night, he refused to enter the bedroom, choosing instead to curl up near the door, ears twitching at every sound. Anna reminded herself that it was probably stress or fatigue. Maybe she was getting sick. People imagined things when they were run down. Still, she started writing down every strange occurrence in a separate notebook, times, locations, what she heard or saw. The list was short, but it was growing. The tapping returned, now at 3:11 a.m. every night. Always 3 taps. Then silence. No footsteps, no doors. Just those 3 cold, measured knocks from somewhere within the walls. She stopped reading before bed. She kept the hallway light on all night, and for the first time in years, Anna began to feel that her silence had been hiding something else entirely, something waiting, watching. Anna tried to explain it to herself in rational terms. Maybe there were rodents in the walls. Maybe vibrations from traffic outside had caused the taps. But every time she looked for a cause, nothing held. She didn't sleep through a single night that week. The taps came precisely at 3:11 a.m., like a metronome counting down to something she couldn't name. Her notes were growing messier, more frantic. She started leaving her phone's voice recorder on overnight. The first 3 nights captured only static, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak, but on the 4th night, something else slipped in. 3 sharp taps, then a whisper, just a single word, drawn out, almost too faint to hear. She played it over and over, headphones pressed to her ears. It was either her name or something terrifyingly close to it. Anaya. She didn't tell Mr. Riley again. She knew what he would say: stress, anxiety, loneliness. But it wasn't just that. There were patterns, intent, purpose. The light bulb in her hallway flickered whenever she walked under it. Poe refused to sleep in the same room as her anymore. Her bookshelf had been rearranged one morning only slightly, but enough for her to know. The titles were still alphabetical, but one of the books had been opened to a page she hadn't read in years, a passage circled in red pen. It watches not from a distance, but from within your knowing. At the library, she found herself searching the archives for stories about the building accidents, hauntings, missing people. There was little, just vague mentions of renovations and an unexplained electrical fire 20 years ago. She stopped, writing in her journal. Every time she opened it, she felt watched, not paranoid, observed, like something behind her eyes was reading over her shoulder. Then came the smell, not smoke anymore, but something like wet soil and iron. She woke up one night with the scent thick in her nose, as if the ground had opened beneath her bed. There were marks on her sheets, faint like fingers, but not hers. No one believed her. She didn't blame them. Even she questioned herself. But something was moving in her life now, slowly, deliberately, like water leaking through stone. Quiet, but persistent. Each day felt colder, as though something had shifted in the air itself. It wasn't just the season, it was presence. On the evening of October 18th, Anna came home to find her door unlocked. She stood in the hallway, staring at the handle, her breath held still in her chest. She never forgot to lock it. That much she knew. Inside, everything looked untouched. Nothing was stolen, nothing moved at least not visibly. But as she walked from room to room, turning on lights, something felt off. The apartment was too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath with her. She walked to her desk and noticed. Her journal had been pulled slightly out from the drawer. She hadn't opened it in days. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it, the cover ice cold. When she flipped it open, the pages weren't as she'd left them. Her entries had been underlined in pencil. Not her handwriting, just a faint gray scrawl marking certain sentences. I don't think I'm alone anymore. It's not the noise that scares me, it's the silence after. It knows when I'm pretending not to see it. Below the last entry, where the page should have been blank, something had been written. You do see me. She slammed it shut and backed away, heart pounding, panic finally taking shape. There was no more guessing, no more wondering. It was real. She called her sister, but the line dropped before she could speak. She dialed again, no signal. Her phone lit up with a message notification. It was blank, just an empty bubble. Sent from no one. Sent to no one. Poe was gone. She searched the apartment, under the couch, in the closet, behind the fridge. No cat, no sound, no fur. Just his collar, laid neatly in the sink like it had been placed there on purpose. The lights went out, all of them at once. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her throat locked up with cold. She lit a candle from the kitchen drawer, its trembling flame dancing against the walls. The hallway stretched longer than she remembered. The apartment seemed deeper, warped. When she looked in the mirror above the sink, her reflection was gone, not altered, not distorted, Gone. Just the room behind her. Empty that night. She didn't sleep. She sat in the corner of her room with the candle flickering beside her, knees pulled to her chest. It wasn't fear now, it was knowing. The fragile boundary of logic had broken. Whatever was with her, it wasn't trying to scare her anymore. It was ready. Anna no longer trusted time. The clocks in her apartment blinked random hours, each device showing a different lie. The sun rose too slowly. Nights lasted longer than they should. She stopped counting days. They no longer obeyed sequence or logic. Some mornings, she woke up in clothes she didn't remember putting on. Other times, she found her own handwriting on scraps of paper she hadn't written, phrases like "don't ask again" and "the door isn't real." She tried leaving 3 times. The first time, the elevator simply didn't open. The second, she found herself back at her own front door, despite taking the stairs. The third time, she walked down the hallway, turned the corner, and found her apartment number again. Her building had become a labyrinth. Or perhaps it never was a building at all. Desperation replaced fear. She began recording everything in her journal again, not to understand, but to prove to herself that she still existed. Her handwriting grew frantic. On several pages, her entries dissolved into looping lines and blacked-out boxers, as if she had tried to bury something she couldn't bear to read. The shadows grew bolder. They didn't stay in the corners anymore. They stood behind her reflection. They whispered behind the closet door. She never saw them directly, but she could feel their breath near her ear, cold and damp, like mildew on flesh. One evening, she found a crack in the living room wall, just a thin slit, like the drywall had split. She touched it and it pulsed under her fingers, faintly, warm, breathing. That night, she heard someone crying inside the walls. Anna began doubting her own memories. She forgot her mother's voice. She tried calling her childhood friend Claire, but when the voicemail played, it wasn't Claire. It was Anna's voice, and it said, "Stop looking." She tore through her belongings, searching for photographs, for proof that she had once lived a normal life. Most were gone, others were altered, faces scratched out, rooms unfamiliar. In one, she stood in front of a window that didn't exist in her apartment, smiling beside someone with no eyes. Her thoughts began to bend. She spoke aloud just to hear, a human voice, even if it was her own. She stopped turning off the lights. She stopped closing her eyes when she blinked. Every moment felt like the prelude to something unspeakable. She realized the thing haunting her wasn't trying to scare her anymore. It was wearing her down. So when it came, she wouldn't resist. She would be ready. It happened at 3:17 a.m. Anna had stopped sleeping. But she still kept the ritual of lying in bed, lights on, phone clutched in hand. That night, the walls were too quiet. The shadows didn't whisper. The air felt heavy, thick, like the moment. Before a scream, the crack in the wall had widened. Now it stretched from floor to ceiling, black as oil, and pulsing slightly, like something breathing behind it. She hadn't touched it again since the crying, but tonight, something about it demanded attention. It was no longer a fracture, it was an invitation. She stepped closer, no dramatic wind, no flickering lights, just a slow certainty that the boundary between her and whatever had been watching had finally thinned enough to break. She pressed her hand against the crack. Her fingers didn't meet plaster, they sank through. The sensation was soft, warm, like pushing through damp velvet. She pulled her hand back. It was dry, nothing on her skin, but her heart wouldn't stop pounding. And then she saw herself, not in a mirror, not a reflection, standing just across the room. Same hair, same pajamas, same tired eyes, but not her. The smile was wrong, too wide, the posture too still. It tilted its head. Anna didn't move. The other her did. It stepped closer. She stumbled, backward, tripping on the corner of the rug, hitting the floor hard. The other her didn't blink, didn't breathe. It opened its mouth. Her voice came out, but the words were wrong, bent, backwards. Nonsense twisted through familiar syllables. Anna crawled, her nails scratching at the wood. The walls pulsed. The crack split open wider, and through it came whispers in hundreds of voices. All of them. Hers. The apartment began to dissolve. Not physically, but perceptually. Walls stretched, furniture warped. Time slowed to a crawl. Her thoughts fractured. She saw herself in a dozen memories, watching from outside her own eyes. She was becoming. Unstuck, the other Anna crouched beside her, gently, and whispered, "You kept scratching. You were always going to let me in." That's when she remembered the dreams. From months ago, dreams of a door that bled light, a voice that hummed inside her skull. She hadn't found this thing. She'd called it over and over again. With her loneliness, her need, her weakness, she stopped fighting, and as the other Anna reached out and touched her chest, she understood. This wasn't possession. It was replacement, and she was the one who opened the door. The morning light filtered through the curtains, just as it always had. The apartment was still. The air no longer hummed. Everything appeared untouched: mugs in the sink, blanket on the couch, laundry folded in a neat stack at the edge of the bed. Ordinary.com. Anna stood at the kitchen counter, barefoot, holding a cup of tea. She stared through the window at the brick wall across the alley. Her movements were precise, methodical, like muscle memory guiding her through routine. Nothing in her posture suggested urgency or alarm, but something was missing in her stillness. Small and vital, like breath held too long. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Inside the bedroom, the crack in the wall had sealed itself. There was no sign it had ever been. There no blemish, no disturbance in the paint, just a smooth surface, as if nothing had happened, as if it had all been imagined. But beneath that thin layer of plaster, the pulse remained. Slow, faint, patient. Outside, the city went on. Sirens wailed in the distance. A neighbor's dog barked. Life returned to its usual rhythm. Anna opened her journal. The pages were filled with writing, her handwriting, but none of the words made sense anymore. They slanted sideways, letters nested inside each other like roots of some foreign language. She ran her fingers across the ink. The words shivered faintly beneath her touch. She smiled. It was subtle, not sinister, not overt, but it didn't reach her eyes, because they weren't hers. Not anymore. Later that day, she would go outside. She would smile at her neighbors. She would browse shelves at the bookstore and take slow, deep breaths in the park. She would mimic everything Anna used to do, and no one would notice. But sometimes, late at night, the people who passed her on the street would feel something brush against their thoughts. A flicker of recognition without context. A shiver at the base of the spine. They would glance at her and forget why they were uneasy. She'd smile again, and they'd smile back, uncertain and nervous. Then forget, and in the quiet, just beneath the surface of her voice, if someone listened closely, they might hear an echo. Not loud, not obvious. Just a second voice riding beneath her own, telling the same story, whispering the same fears, wearing the same skin. Anna's story didn't end with screams or blood. It ended with silence, with imitation, with an echo that no longer needed the original sound. And the worst part, no one would ever know she was gone.